And so without further ado, I will introduce onto stage the fantastic Impro LA on Redefining Theatre. Hello.
Hello, hello. Hello, 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 hello. So, we, just for those of you who don't know what we do, because I saw that this was labeled lecture, and I was like, no, I don't know about that. It's more of Q&A with a little bit of an intro. So we'll just introduce ourselves. I'm Dan O'Connor. I'm the artistic director of the company.
I'm Edi Patterson. I'm one of the ensemble members of the company.
Stephen Kearin, ensemble member of the company.
Madi Goff, ensemble member of the company, and here I'm the technical improviser.
So what we do in Los Angeles, for those of you who don't know, is we make up, we improvise full-length unscripted narratives in the styles of famous writers and composers. And we also have a school. The main company, though, does most of our shows at different venues around Los Angeles County. So we basically tour Los Angeles County and other places. We also do something that's rather unique in that we go and do shows on other theater sets. So we have a relationship with a theater down in San Diego where they tell us what sets they have and we program our shows to their sets. So it's great because we come in tech and there's a light grid and a set and we already know what we're working with. And all of our shows have sound designers, actually no, costume designers, set designers. What's the matter? You good?
Oh, yeah.
And so it's full production. So when we do Jane Austen, we have full Regency gear, costumes, lights, sound, and the whole thing that a regular play would, except there's no script. And you guys want to add on to our description of ourselves?
That was pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Well, that's it. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks for
Bye.
coming.
And we do, right now we're in residency at the Broad Stage in Santa Monica, which is part of the Santa Monica College Performing Arts Center. And we're doing 10 genres over 10 months. We just finished Sondheim in September, and then we did horror, which Edi co-directed in October. And this weekend, while we're not there, is LA Noir Unscripted, which is a noir film improvised on stage with a jazz trio, a live jazz trio providing the score. And then in December, we do Jane Austen. And then in January or early February, we're doing an improvised fairy tale on their main stage, which is a 500-seat venue for kids. And then we're doing Chekhov improvised, Twilight Zone,
Dorothy
Williams.
Parker,
yeah.
Tennessee Williams, Shakespeare. Then I think we're done there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we go until June of next year. And then we also we have a studio space where we do more experimental work for the main company, and then our students also have shows going on there that range from everything from improvised Star Trek Next Generation to what's the horror thing that Hungerford just did?
Lovecraft.
Improvised H.P. Lovecraft, which is really chilling and disturbing in every way. So we do lots of different things in there. The main company that's been focusing on doing play unscripted, which is looking at modern contemporary playwrights and then improvising a 2-hour play that's modern and that speaks to sort of modern life, what have you. So what we thought we would do, rather than lecture, is just answer any questions people have about narrative, unscripted theater. We don't call it long form. It's a conversation that we talked about, that I talked about with my class this morning, is that long form to us kind of means heralds and other formats. And what we do is do a play. We just do a play that has no script. So we don't really call it long form. We call it unscripted theater. How am I doing so far, guys?
So
really
good.
good. So
Incredible.
good.
Really good.
Mhm.
I give it a B.
Thanks.
You have a question here?
Great to meet you guys. Oh, thank you. Thanks. I feel so professional. Really nice to meet you guys and hear what you're doing. So how do you decide what is pre-thought through and what is completely what is improvised? Is it based on an audience suggestion since you know your genres? Since sometimes you know your sets, it sounds fantastic. So if you're in the same genre for a month, like what's improvised or how is that done?
Everything is improvised.
So I guess, so could you walk through how do you start that? What do you do exactly?
Sure. Do you mean the rehearsal process and things like that?
Well, that too, but I guess I meant if you're doing a genre.
Show.
If you're doing a genre for a month,
Got
it's
it.
going to change every night because it's improvised. So is
Totally.
it because are you basing it on one of you directing, or are you basing it on an audience suggestion?
It's based on audience suggestion, and there's no directing during the show. So yeah, the shows are wildly different every night because there's nothing set. There's no set characters. There's no set. This is how they begin, or this is how we go to an intermission, or nothing is set.
So what's the call out you give the audience? What do you? How
It
do you start the
depends.
show?
It depends from style to style. When we were just doing horror, we would ask the audience for an object or a place, and when we're doing Jane Austen, we ask for a trivial topic of conversation.
Of that era.
Yeah, for Twilight Zone this evening, each episode has a different ask at the beginning of the 20-minute episode. So through the rehearsal process, you do discover kind of what asks from the audience will bring you into the world. One ask for Twilight Zone is, what is an occupation that your grandmother or grandfather would have had, since, because it's probably of that era. But it really does change and just sort of gives the show a lift or something to launch from.
For Tennessee Williams, we've asked for a real family heirloom, something that really exists in your family. And one of the shows, I think probably 4 or 5 years ago, someone said 4 ceramic heads. So we did a show about this, someone had a weird wig collection. I guess they were ceramic heads to put your wigs on or something like that. But we've gotten some really interesting stuff.
That one was always really evocative because it was people's actual things that they always had some amount of emotion around it, or so that one was always really fun to ask people for.
For Sondheim, we had a separate ask for the musician, which was 4 notes, and those were that he would weave them throughout the night.
He would improvise an overture using those 4 notes.
So in doing that, I wish I could have been there for it. Maybe I can watch it online. In
Yeah.
doing Sondheim, when you asked for the notes, which makes complete sense, did you ask for other things, or did you base the whole show
Yeah.
on the 4 notes? Okay,
We
so
asked-
like a multiple.
Yeah, for Sondheim, we asked for the 4 notes and for
What is this story about? Or no, this story is about
blank.
and we let them fill in the
Yeah.
And when we come back from the intermission, because the typical theater goer who hasn't been exposed to a lot of improv will say, well, of course, they're back there planning during the interval. And what we ask for is, first off, we tell the audience who we think we're playing at that point. And then secondly, we ask them to decide which characters start the second half so that we can't possibly plan. And bless you. And of course, what they inevitably do is pick the most disparate characters to start.
Which is kind of
Yes.
helpful because there's nothing we can plan. And so in intermission, we just sit around and we talk about what is already. And we sort of solidify, like, okay, I know you're my mom. I know I'm married to that guy. I know this happened, but we don't, nothing next.
Another thing with a side note with the set and costumes is the set designer and the costume designer have all worked with us before. And I don't think you said this earlier.
I didn't.
And they are very good about creating, not neutral to where it's like boring, but we could play anything. We could play children. We could play our own age. We could play, into whatever type of character we wanted to jump into that night. And then our set designer does something similar along with the set. It's not just a living room. It's fluid. It could be a million different things. And then on shows where we've gone to perform on someone else's set, we just do that for ourselves. I remember we did at North Coast I think it was a noir or something on like an old radio station set, and we were all over the place. And then we actually used the radio station set too. But we would use it as a big business office and a home. So
I think
we're
we learned
flexible.
through doing that too. When things are too specific, it's very hindering, and we've just learned that through through going through the fire of that and going like, oh, there were too many steps in this one, or there were too many balconies, or that porch killed us every time because we were on a porch every time we were on it, or, you know.
Yeah.
We had the luck of being on to do Chekhov on an Ibsen set, which is basically around the same time, and it was Hedda Gabler. Spoiler alert, they burn a manuscript in Hedda Gabler. But we ended up burning somebody's poetry in the same furnace because there's a furnace on stage. So we used something from Hedda Gabler in our improvised Chekhov. Also, because we're doing a different play every night, one of the interesting things is we have audience members who will come and see 10, 12, 15 shows in a run because they know that it's going to be different every night. Some of whom started to see if they could catch out what format we were using, and then they realized we weren't using a format and became fans. So it's a lot of fun to never know what you're going to end up doing on the night. Yeah.
I guess it's very difficult to do what you guys do, and this needs a lot of preparation. This morning we talked about the entertainment value, educational value, and also and then artistic value, I guess. Which value do you try to create the most from this, what you do?
It feels like all three
Mm-hmm.
really interwoven. You guys can step in. It feels like, because you said educational, artistic, and what was the third one? Oh, entertainment. Yeah, it feels like they're all happening at the same time. I don't know if we, at least for me, when I'm directing a show, I'm not consciously separating. It just feels like that all happens together.
It's
Yeah.
I almost think that here's what I think right now. This might change, but I almost think if you're going for the truth, which I guess would be the artistic value of those three circles, then I think the other two happen automatically without trying. Yeah.
Yeah, we've never really prioritized that in any way except to honor the writer. Like the idea that if Tennessee Williams or Rod Serling or Jane Austen was sitting in the audience watching one of the shows, they might recognize themselves in it. And that's very different. Like there's very successful parody improvisational versions of a number of the styles that we do. But we're not going for the jokes of, making some sort of modern day reference to anything inside of Jane Austen or Williams or whatever it is. We're trying to do an homage. We're trying to do the best possible Twilight Zone episode that we can, rather than going for laughs and hoping. I think the philosophy is that by just to yes and what Edi said, the philosophy of going for the truth of the genre is going to bring out comedy and good story, what have you, as opposed to the low-hanging fruit. I use this example with my class this morning. When we used to do Tennessee Williams in theater sport shows, because it's a 2-minute or 3-minute scene, you just had to talk about humidity, bourbon, and mendacity, and then you were fine. So it was a very gaggy way of doing a parody, as opposed to what we're trying to do, which is to really do a Tennessee Williams play that hasn't been written yet.
We had a contemporary of Tennessee Williams see the show, and he approved. He said he would have approved too. I think is how he worded it, right?
Yeah, and he was complaining in the lobby beforehand. Tennessee would hate this. Tennessee,
Why did you bring me to
Why did
this?
you bring me to this?
Exactly.
He was really not looking forward to it, and then afterwards, he was really sweet. Yeah.
But do you say it's fair to say that I feel like we filter and sit on a lot of jokes constantly in order to heighten value the artistry of it and keep it out of parody and in homage territory.
Yeah.
Because you can really feel when your low-hanging fruit of a joke breaks the tension of the scene, and you get a cheap laugh. We were just doing horror, and man, when we're in that sense of unease and dread, and in a great way for the story, if someone went for a joke, then you could just feel the air going out of the room, and you had to work so much
And you have
harder.
to build all that up again.
Yeah, and when you're truly earnest and just feeling what your character is feeling, you will get laughs, but you're not trying for them. They will come out of the fact that you're improvising and your character earnestly wants something, and they just happen. You can just feel you actually get lift from it instead of having to reset and restart. But that's a training. We train for that. That we teach each other that, right, in the rehearsal process of what we're going for.
So how do you go about like preparing either yourselves or the group for a specific genre? Do you, of course, you watched a lot of these plays, but do you have like a bucket list that you like? These are the points that are typical in the different genres, or
yeah, I think each genre is so different. So maybe the different directors can talk a little bit, because as Stephen and I are co-directing Twilight Zone and Unscripted, and for that there's so many things going on at the same time. One is really taking a look at the original series and what the vision was of Rod Serling and his point of view as a writer and what made him who he was. There's that. There's sort of an immersion or marination process that the whole cast has to do the homework and get really clear on the writer. There is the time period that they're coming out of and what that was. So that's a big part of the studying. And then there's also the basic, that's great, but that's scripted. So how do we improvise this? Because we have to do a lot of a lot of making bad pancakes is a saying, where you're like, okay, well how do we, with all this mixed together and with all the personalities of the ensemble, how do we create the tone so that the audience feels like they just saw a Twilight Zone episode, for example? So all those things together, I feel like there's not one thing. It's just this immersion at all these different, looking at all these different angles, and then letting it all go so you're not thinking on stage, but you've done as much as you can beforehand, and then when you're improvising, you got to be breathing and relaxed, and it will come to you.
And live in the world.
And live in the
So
world,
we know
yeah.
the world that we all share, and so you can let it go.
how long time would you?
Let's see. We usually have an 8-week rehearsal process, right? Twice a week,
Yeah,
so 5
like that.
sometimes. And then, but some of our genres we've been doing for 5-10 years. So then every time you revisit it, you go deeper, which is fantastic. That's my favorite thing, is to revisit something. But when it's brand new, like we just did horror for the first time, that was intense.
Yeah, because we had an abbreviated rehearsal process for that one, which was 4 weeks, twice a week. So for that one, Ryan, the guy I co-directed it with, and we had a list of movies that were homework that we wanted people to watch, and then we would discuss those movies. And with horror, there was a lot of talking about vibe and what makes you feel scared when you watch that, and how are they achieving certain things, and how are they achieving, like, when someone's in an altered state, and a lot of, with horror rehearsals, we would stand around and experiment and make bad pancakes, like Joe's saying, and just be open to sort of failing upwards and failing forward, rather, and saying, let's try a bunch of things to make Joe's character feel like she is losing her mind. Let's just try different things in a scene that could feel that way. And so we would find things in rehearsal that way, but they may never show up in a show. So it's just a lot of experimentation and trying to nail a vibe and a feeling. And like Steven's saying, knowing the rules of the world you're in, and knowing that if you're, in Regency England, people don't have cell phones, and nobody's, trying not to get anachronistic, or knowing that girls have to get married, or else their life is going to be terrible, and like things that, and that was an interesting one for Jane Austen. For a lot of us, is realizing that the things that matter to them may make us angry, like as feminists, or as people who have, live in a different world. But yeah, you have to get your head right and just know, like, I'm there now,
And just even the smallest of things, like a touch, could be a lightning bolt moment between a man and a woman. That sort of thing, the pace, and intimacy is different. So again, knowing the rules, and then once that's established, that can really build like an unbelievable amount of tension. Like in Jane, the tension can be really high between the couples, you know, but it's not the same as today. You know, it's very, very pushed down and very restrained, and just an accidental touch. You know, the place just lights up just because it's just electric, yeah.
So yeah, and that's almost like the rules of that world, and talking about how it goes down.
And then there's technical stuff like improvising Chekhov, getting the cast to understand patronymics, because in Russian, your middle name is your father's first name. So if you get endowed as being Stephen's son, if Stephen's been named, we know that your middle name is his character's first name. And remembering that and learning the patronymic. I mean, there's whiteboards in the wings where we're writing down, what is his name again? You know, so there's a lot of heavy lifting that goes on when you're learning a style like that.
I would say most of us, when we start a style, aren't well versed in it. Usually just the directors are. I know when we just did horror, there was at least half the cast were not into horror movies previously.
And very scared to do the homework.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, terrified to watch the movies we were
during the
assigning.
day.
Yeah.
October was it was a terrible month.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. Did you have some more? Yeah.
Quick follow-up, so you said that you were rehearsing like once a week or twice a week, depending on how much you rehearsed. But of course, there's a lot of homework. So there are. How long do you practice the 1 day in a week, and how much do you? Of course, that's personal though. But how much do you rehearse or immerse yourself, as you say, during your personal hours?
I think it is individual. I know the rehearsals are usually 3 hours, like 7 to 10 at night or 10 to 1 if it's a day rehearsal. And then as far as individually, for me, if we're in a style, I feel like I have to do something every day. So where I'm thinking about it, watching it, listening to it, you know, while I'm working out, or somehow, so that by the time showtime comes, you can relax, and it's about letting go. You don't have to make anything happen. It's not like working super hard. It's more of like breathing and letting all the work you've done just show up. So, but I think everyone's slightly different.
Yeah, I do like it if I can muster a little bit every day. But I also like to go into a rehearsal with a little bit of a cram right behind me, of like having just watched something or having just read something. Just for me personally, that makes me feel sort of like lit up about it. But yeah, I think everyone comes at it a little differently.
I think it also depends on the genre that you're going into, because like I was one of the people for horror that had never watched horror movies. So going into that, I remember going into our first rehearsal, I felt very lost. But then further on down the line, when I had watched a million horror movies, I just constantly watched horror movies throughout the day and week, and I felt so much more comfortable, and I got the vibe by the end of it. So I think it depends on, you know, and if we go into Jane, then I can definitely do a whole lot less, because we've done Jane a lot.
Yeah, actually yesterday in LA they did a all-day noir rehearsal.
Oh yeah, we do that sometimes. We'll do like a whole day leading up to a tech or something. I love those actually.
I do too.
Yeah, me too.
It's funny how it changes the way you're in the world too.
Yes.
I mean, when you're in the world, you're seeing the world a little differently depending on the style. You know, horror, I know all of us had moments where we thought we saw something that wasn't there. Or
Yeah, a full month of all of us coming to rehearsal every time
Truly.
and going, "Oh my God, listen what I dreamed last night," or look what I think I saw outside my house. We were all in this heightened state of,
I remember coming home, we were talking about this last night, coming home from a rehearsal, and we walked our dog, you know, the last one of the night, you know, so you take him out one more time, and standing there in the middle of LA, and hoo, 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 in a tree, hoo, hoo, hoo. Like, oh God, of course, this is ridiculous. There's a freaking owl, you know, just sort of skin on. What was that? Pee faster, you know, to the dog. So we could
Hi everyone. So
Hi.
the first question I had was about the genre. I think so. It's partly answered. The spectrum of parody and homage, and where you fall in between. I understand the parodying being a low-hanging fruit. What I thought was, is there a genre that you use for commentary? Suppose Jane Austen, or if you were doing a Mad Men style genre, where you're talking about the play is going on as it is, but the dialogues are have double meaning, where it's addressed to the character, but it's also a reference to the audience. Like, someday my daughter will become a CEO, and when it's present in that age, it's a commentary on the limitations of that era.
I would say that sneaks in every now and then, but we're never really going for it. But it for sure it sneaks in.
Yeah, we try to really stay in the world and do something that he or she would have written, rather than. I mean, it has happened before.
But if any way you cut it, when that's happening, you are a little bit outside of it. You know what I mean?
And that's not a good thing.
We're trying to be
It's not great for us, but it does happen. But yeah, when that does happen, you're definitely you're in your improviser thinking head of like, oh, I've got this clever thing, instead of like, I'm just this person, I'm this character. So yeah, we try to stay away from it, I would say. Wouldn't you say that's fair? Yeah.
I would say though, when in just like dealing with today's issues on stage in these genres, I think we still do that, but it's as if Chekhov was alive today, saw what was happening in the world, and wrote a play still set in the time period in which he wrote.
In its earnest. And
So in its earnest, yeah. So we still try to deal with things happening today, but we don't step out of it in that referential sort of way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and just a follow-up question, like in LA, is your improv styles, it should be dictated by the audience. So is there any particular taste or genre that the audience seems to be drawn towards, like in that demographic? Are some genres more popular? Are some genres not as well received? And do you tailor your approach depending on that?
We don't tailor it.
We're unusual.
We play theaters that we don't play improv theaters. We play full-on theaters. So the audiences are used to coming and see plays. So we never really have to cater it in that way. But definitely there are some that are more popular. I would say Jane is incredibly popular.
And I mean, half our audience at some of these venues has never seen improv before. So they're not sure what
They don't
they've
know
just seen.
what they're
So
looking at.
we get besieged afterwards in the lobby because they want to understand what it is they just saw, because they're so confused. They like it. They're just not sure what they saw.
Or they don't believe it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know,
My mom
we
still
we
doesn't
try
know
not
it.
to we try not to make commercial decisions. Jane Austen has been very successful, but if we were really commercially motivated, we would never do improvised Chekhov, because there are people who don't like real Chekhov, and so we're trying to convert people slowly but surely. But as an improviser, doing Chekhov is so much fun.
Oh, it's so fun.
So we're interested in finding new stuff. Like the play unscripted thing is a very it's us trying to create new stuff, and hopefully we bring an audience in who's interested in seeing what we're going to do next. But we haven't really looked at it from the standpoint of what does the market, what does the market bear, or what do people want?
Maybe our school, maybe some of the students in our school kind of do that, but we as a company don't do that.
Yeah, Lovecraft is not accepted.
No, not Lovecraft, but I'm saying the sort of pop culture-y, sci-fi ones.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think the studio, the students, go to Comic-Cons and perform at Comic-Cons and stuff, and it takes it to a different realm of rather than being a theater show or redefining theater, it takes it to a different kind of place, but they still are trying to do the same thing with homage, and they are benefiting from an incredible established fan base. Star Trek, X-Files. Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving us an insight into your world, ladies and gentlemen, Improv Theatre.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you can catch them doing Twilight Zone tonight at 7:45 up here in the auditorium, and Tennessee Williams later on in the week. Okay, thank you
Cool.
so much.
Cheers.
It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you.